first of all, I want to thank you guys for being here. It's a very casual setting, and so we want you to ask as many questions as you can. It is Happy New Year to everybody, by the way. And Chris and I are going to be sharing responsibility today to discuss this topic with you. It's very exciting. We used to do quite a few of these rehab loans. And I will let you guys know going into it that this is probably one of the more complex types of financing that a consumer can do. Okay, so there's a lot of advantages to doing a rehab loan. But today we are going to go over those, and we're going to give you a sense of what is involved in them and the different types and how to qualify, like what they are, how do they work, what do you need to make sure that they go as smoothly as possible, what is allowed for improvements. A lot of people do these as rehabs in properties that they already live in, and basically the pros and the cons. So essentially, a rehab loan is different than a construction loan. It's the same flavor as a construction loan. It's just that you cannot start brand new with a rehab loan. A rehab loan, Chris reminded me last week that one wall must remain with the foundation, Chris, right?
That's correct.
For it to be technically a rehab loan. So you cannot buy a piece of land and start construction. That would be a construction loan. And there's even more down payment required in a situation like that. With a rehab loan, there's not nearly as much cash needed in a rehab loan, okay? And there's different types of rehab loans. There is a very limited rehab loan, which is called a 203K. It's essentially for cosmetic work. So people could buy a property and the kitchen is in disrepair. There's holes in the cabinets or in the walls. You need new appliances, new flooring, things like that. It's typically, $20,000, $30,000 worth of repairs. And we can easily do that as a 203K loan. Okay. Then there's FHA and there's conventional, right? There's FHA, which we call 203K, and then there's the conventional loans. So Fannie Mae has a home style renovation loan. This home style renovation loan can also be used on investment properties, on one unit investment properties. If you were going to buy a triplex and move into it, that would be an owner occupied multi-unit home. You could do it on a multi-unit home if you were going to live in the property. With Fannie Mae, you could, this is how we're going to do investment properties. Kelsey, this is how we'll do them for investors, with the contractor doing that and the people buying distressed properties. That would be how we would do it for investment properties. And then there's yes?
Sorry to interrupt. I wasn't sure if you had the PowerPoint, if you meant to have the PowerPoint up, but it's not up.
Okay. So it hasn't been up the whole time?
You told me to flag you when it came up.
Okay. Sorry. Well, I guess I'll start all over again then. Sorry, Chris, I didn't know it wasn't up. Okay. Let me know when you can see it, because I thought it was up from the very beginning.
I see George.
Gosh, I wish I would have known that 10 minutes ago.
There we go.
Thanks for letting me know. All right. So again, there's three different types of investment, on renovation loans. Does anybody have any questions on these different types of loans?
I think we have one.
Okay.
And that is from Miss Dare. How extensive can a work be for you to qualify for a rehab loan?
Chris, you want to answer that? I'm not clear with the
Absolutely.
question.
For a rehab, if it's a limited, then, non-structural items, cosmetics, kind of onesies, twosies type things. But for the other two, um, Fannie Mae, conventional, you can pretty much have a complete gut job as long as there's one wall left. So quite an extensive rehab. The same for the 203K regular, the standard, as long as it's not for luxury items such as swimming pools and things like that. So you can have an extensive remodel as long as you keep one wall in there and no luxury items.
The obvious thing about a rehab loan that most people don't realize is that the amount of time that it takes to, like, people think, well, I'll find this property, and it's a distressed property, and if it's a distressed property, the theory is that if you were purchasing it, you could get it as a really good deal because it's not financeable, right? That's the whole thing about it. It's, you can't finance a really distressed property. Not a property that has cosmetic repairs, that's easily financeable, but a property that needs structural work, or you're adding on square footage, changing walls, putting in load bearing beams and things like that. That is a full out reno loan. You have to get the contractor approved, and and what a lot of times people do is they wait. They don't even have a contractor, and so they make an offer on a house, and then they try to find a contractor. Whereas what I would suggest that you guys do is find a contractor first, for you to speak with different contractors ahead of time, because what they need to do is fill out an application, and they need to be approved in order to be approved to do these types of rehab loans. So what we like to do is get the application to the contractor way before we need them, let them go through the whole process of getting approved. And you may say, well, I don't know which contractor I'm going to use because it depends on their quote. Then I guess get two or three approved. But you don't want to get hung up and waiting for the contractor to fill out the application for weeks, because their references will be checked and things like that. And the seller of the property is probably not going to give you more than 60 days to close on that loan, probably. um, so people buy distressed properties and they can actually pay for them with cash. They can do that. But they can't finance in the repairs then. And if you pay for them with cash, and then let's say you buy a property and it's $100,000, and then you put into the property, let's say $50,000. So now you paid $100,000 for the property and you paid $50,000 for repairs. You could say, hey, Amy, I'll just get the cash out. I'll refinance it, and later it will be worth 225, but I only spent 150 on it. But the issue is you can't get credit for that appraised value unless you own the property for 1 year. Used to be 6 months, but now it's 1 year. And so that's why people do these rehab loans instead, is because they can actually finance in the repairs, right? And so it's a really big opportunity to do. And I have done rehab loans on properties while I've lived in them. I've done them twice, and I like that because I'm already living in it, and I'm able to really watch what the contractors are doing. And they were big rehabs. They were not little rehabs, so they were over six figures in both cases. And so you're able to watch what they're doing literally on a daily basis. So that is also possible to do on your primary residences, right? Um, just want to make sure that you guys can see what is on the screen in terms of the most common repairs, which are, kitchen remodeling, bathroom remodeling, flooring, updating of electrical and plumbing. There's cosmetic improvements. Sometimes there's structural, and sometimes there's outdoor living spaces or energy efficiency and things like that. All these things are allowed. If you were to, for example, Sean, buy a property and say, I want to build a pool and I want to build like a steam room. And in fact, I'd really like to build like a wine cellar also. It is questionable whether those things would add value enough to appraise. So I had this guy once buy a property. It was like a Victorian property. He was a drama instructor. He moved here from, he was like a pretty well-known guy. Like he was in commercials and stuff like that. And he moved here from New Hampshire or someplace like that. And so it was like his dream to be in this old Victorian house. And he wanted to improve the house like a couple $100,000, which is more than at the time what the property was even being sold for. And it wouldn't appraise. And so whatever you choose to do to the property, it has to add value to it. And it has to be that there are other homes in the area that support that value, right? Chris, do you think I missed anything on these remodeling repair things?
No, I think you got it pretty well.
Okay, cool. So essentially what happens in this step-by-step process is rehab loans are a little bit stricter to get approved. So if you're approved to buy a house, it doesn't mean that you would get approved with those same ratios to do a rehab loan, okay? And so you would want to actually get approved for a rehab loan. You would then, it says choose the property next, but honestly, what I would do is I would choose the contractor. I would choose the agent and the contractor to help me, and I would get the contractor approved. Because that's going to hold up things for a couple weeks. Okay. So you choose the property, you choose the contractor. If you're having two contractors bid on the project, then you could evaluate both bids. You're going to be more than likely involving a HUD consultant because a HUD consultant is required. We have a local HUD consultant here in this area who is also a general contractor, who is also an appraiser, and who is also a real estate agent. So this particular HUD consultant has been doing it for a long time. And in this area can really give you an idea of if the scope of the work that you are looking at is going to be, acceptable and add value and be worth what you're paying for it, if that makes sense. Any questions so far? Okay.
We have one. Kelsey asked, do these loans need applied for at time of purchase, or can they be used for property that is owned already and needs renovations? I assume rehab refi.
Both. If you are going to, they're used in two ways. You can use them when you purchase a property, and you can use them on a property that you already own. If you use them on a property that you already own, that would be a refinance, and that's done about 50% of the time. And I've done refinances with big renovations twice. Or you could do them when you purchase the property. If you do them when you purchase the property, you have to close per your contract. Typically, it takes, Kelsey, about 60 plus days to close on a purchase. And that depends on if you have a contractor already approved and the bid's approved and a HUD consultant and things like that. Does that answer your question? If not, just put in the chat and we'll get it again. So once we get the bids from the contractor, we approve the bids, or we may say that that needs a little bit of tweaking or something like that. And then what happens is we get an appraisal on this property subject to the repairs. Okay. So if you bought the property, and I know you really can't buy many properties for 100,000 nowadays, but say 100,000, and you were doing 50,000 for repairs, obviously the property would have to be worth more than what you have into it, right? And if it wasn't, we would have to adjust what you were doing on that was costing that much money. With FHA loans, you typically have 6 months to do the repairs. With the conventional loans, you have a hard stop at 12 months. We like to tell the contractors in general that all the work needs to be done as close to that 6-month window as possible, right? So we have that. Once the loan closes on the first draw, depending upon the type of loan, that is when the work really begins. Now, when you're dealing with one of the contractors that is doing this rehab loan for you, and you're not allowed to do self work. Okay, it has to be a true general licensed contractor that has experience with these, that has been in business for a while. They have to have insurance and references checked and so on. What happens is there's a scope of work, and typically they get paid as the work is done. So they don't get paid ahead of time. They do not get paid 50 grand up front before any work is done. Okay. When we close initially on a Fannie Mae loan, for example, we would be giving 50% of the material costs typically up front. They don't pay labor up front. They don't pay the labor until the work is done and the HUD consultant has said yes and sent pictures of the work being done to the project manager. So we literally close on the loan essentially before any money is paid type thing. Okay. Questions?
Yes, Sean had a question. The question, and I answered it for her, was how long does the refinance take to close? My answer was, Sean, typically it takes about up to 60 days to close due to the bid gathering and the approval of them, as well as approving the contractor. If the contractor is slow, then it can affect the timeline beyond the 60 days. So really, the contractor holds all the cards on your timeline.
Well, the contractor and the bids, right? So, like, if you, Sean, imagine if you already live in the house. If you already live in the house, you have a lot more time, right? So, I live in my house, and my washing machine overflowed. Okay, and so it was on the second floor, and I woke up one morning, and my entire ceiling of my house was like leaking water. Okay, so it was a nightmare, right? So I had time to figure out, first of all, could I fix this? If I can't fix this, well, what am I going to do? Okay. Like, am I going to build it back the same way it was, or am I going to change it? And then you have the chance as you're living in the house to get an architect involved, bring a builder in, get different builder bids. And then finally, when you have the builder bid, that's when you start the refinance. And it would go pretty quickly because you've already gotten all the bids and had the ideas in your head. If you were purchasing a property and you were a new investor and you were purchasing a property and you really had no idea what to do, then you would hire somebody. Like, we have a great contractor here in the Wake Franklin County area. Um, and he's been doing this since he was out of high school. So he's been in the construction industry for 40 years. And he's going to work with the HUD consultant and give you an idea of what maybe you should do to improve the value of this and make it a rentable property. So Chris is absolutely right that what holds up the whole process is what contractor you're going to use, which is why I said you should get the contractor approved ahead of time if you're even thinking about doing a project like this, and the scope of the work. Like, if you take 2 months to figure out the scope of the work and you have all these change orders and things like that, that is going to affect when you can close. So typically what happens is we give money up front for some of the materials, and then work is done. The consultant goes out, they take pictures of the property, they meet with you, the borrower, and the contractor, and they say, this looks good. They send pictures of it to the bank. The bank says, okay, cool. And then they release the next draw. We call it a draw. And the draw money is released to you, the borrower, and the contractor. It's not released just to you, and it's not released to the contractor. So both people have to sign off on it, which I like that because it's a nice, safe feeling. When the construction is done, typically then you have a certificate of occupancy, right? Because the county, like, the permits have all been gotten and all that ahead of time, right? Then the final draw is paid and everything is done. That's pretty much how it works. So questions?
Candina has a question. What are the down payments expected for investment versus primary home?
You need 25% down minimum on investment property, Candina, on the finished project. So an investment property is a property that you are not going to live in, that you are going to keep and rent out typically. And when you buy an investment property nowadays, you're required to put down 25 or 30%, at the very minimum 20%. And that's the same thing when you do a rehab loan. So it's not really any different with a rehab loan as when you were to purchase an investment property. Does that make sense? And a second home is a home like Candina. Let's say you live here in Franklin County or Wake County, and you're buying a property at the beach. That would be a second home, like a vacation home, like a beach property. Or maybe Phoebe, you live in Asheville. Maybe you were going to be buying a property in Wake County again. Then that would be maybe a second home, or maybe maybe a maybe a maybe an investment property, right? So that's how that would work. With primary residences, you could get in with as little as less than 10% down. It could be as little as maybe 7.5% down if you were doing FHA. If it was a conventional, you'd probably need closer to 9.5 or 10%. And that includes your down payment, your first month's mortgage, your property taxes, your fire insurance. You pay the HUD consultant out of pocket. For the sake of today's discussion, Chris and I came up with that we were going to quote you guys a HUD consultant fee of $900, but it could be $400, it could be $1,200. You pay that HUD consultant fee out of pocket when you meet with the HUD consultant, at least the initial time that you meet with them, that's paid out of pocket. So how does it work? You get bids. You have to hire a licensed general contractor. You hire a consultant, which we will help you with. With FHA, it's primary residences only. With conventional, you can do up to 4 units if you're going to live in the property. If you're doing a vacation home or a investment property, it's basically a single family home or townhome that you'll be doing it on. It's based on the future value of the property. Okay. The contractors we like to have the property completed within 6 months. They will allow with Fannie Mae loans up to 12 months, but that is a drop dead date. Oftentimes, these properties don't have utilities on, so they will hold back a 10 or 15% contingency reserve. If you don't use that, it will get applied towards your principal. The closing, whether it's a refi or whether it's a purchase, will take about 60 days. You could probably get it done in less time if it's a refi, because you've already, gotten the bids done and things like that. You have typically between 2 and 5 draws to get your money. Chris, did I miss anything on those slides that you want me to bring up?
No, I think you did pretty well.
Okay. So for the repairs, the contractor is required to get a very detailed bid. It has to detail the materials. And obviously the project managers managing these projects do these all over the country, so they know what things cost. Like they're involved so that you, the borrower, don't get ripped off, really, right? So they want to make sure that you are not overpaying it. The consultant and us will review the bids. The consultant will review them first. Typically, if you have a consultant, the project goes a lot smoother. For the loan, you have to be pre-approved for a rehab loan, which is different than a pre-approval because the guidelines and the credit scores are a little bit stricter on a rehab loan because they're riskier loans. The loan amount is determined off, it's quite complex. off of worksheets. It's not something that's like figured out at the back of a napkin type thing. It does take a second to figure that out. And the appraised value is critical when it comes to the project amount, the loan amount that's allowed, and things like that. If you are, I'm sorry, when you're doing a purchase contract and you're writing up a FHA loan, you literally have to write into the contract. Sorry for the spelling error here. I just noticed that. You have to write into the purchase contract this verbiage. So if you're doing a 203K loan, this exact verbiage has to be in the contract. So that's why when we pre-approve somebody, we like to have like a conference call with your real estate agent to bring them into this, to like share what the way that you write up the contract and things like that. Okay. Allowable improvements, pretty much the limited is not structural, right? It's cosmetic. And so people could use it to put in a fence and new appliances, and that would be allowed. They could use it to put in gutters. Now, I wouldn't recommend it if you were only doing $5,000 worth of repairs. But if you were doing like 15 or 20, I would definitely consider it. Conventional Fannie Mae home style, we've had people do, $200,000-$300,000 repairs on their property. It allows for larger projects, allows also for rental properties. And then we also have the FHA 203K full loan. And the reason why somebody would do a 203K loan versus a Fannie Mae loan is maybe because they wanted a little bit more leniency with their credit or with their ratios or things like that. Okay. Remember, with these remodels, they're not there. You have to, keep one wall up. My neighbor bought this ranch property that was built in the 70s. And he was a general contractor, and he changed the whole face of the house to look like a mansion. But it was like he kept the foundation, and he actually kept a few walls up. And when we went to see the property after he was done, it was unbelievable. I mean, obviously, it didn't even look at all like the same house. It just was like beautiful. And he was able to do one of these reno loans. They're pretty amazing. Just to share with you some of the trends that we see, and I'm sure that they'll change, but there's a lot of color out there. There's a lot of there's this sort of ivory color. There's a very bright burgundy is it's too dark of a color that what I'm saying. It's actually like a more pink color. But there's a lot of these bright colors if you start to look around. There's a lot of multifunctional spaces. There's little spaces like you go into your closet, and in the back of your closet, like this little room, and they call it like the mama's cave. They're having like these little like spaces where the mom can get away from the family and have her own little office in the back of her closet. It's pretty interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of working spaces like that where guest rooms also function as an office because a lot of people are able to work from home now. Keep in mind that if you build some like really eccentric thing, that's going to be harder for you to sell down the line, right? And so just be aware of that. Of course, tile is in, wood has always been in. This color upward paint, I'll show you a picture of it. It's right here. It has a little bit of it doesn't really look like it here, but it's a little tiny bit of a violet skew. This light blue baby color is supposed to be one of the colors of the year this year. And also what you see a lot of round lighting. And Chris and I were talking about this today. You either like it or you don't. But there's a lot like lighting, when you go into a lot of these parade homes, adds a lot of value to homes. Of course, people want HVACs, they want roofs. These are big safety items. Charging stations, mud rooms are big, you know. And what happens if you already own the home, Sean? You were asking about that. It's basically just done as a refi. You stay in the house, you can oversee it. It's not easy to stay in the house. Like, we literally had to move our refrigerator and our stove out to the garage. And I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch, but we did it. We did it twice. So, should you consider a rehab loan? Well, if you don't have the funds to pay for the rehab out of pocket, then obviously it's great to finance. If you have a 3% rate right now and you don't want to move because you don't want to get in bidding wars as interest rates begin to drop, bidding wars are already beginning to happen again. You can refinance your existing home and add on and improve the property and not pay to, buy the house and sell the house, any real estate commissions. You could just stay where you are and possibly add value to your house that way. And if you stay in it long enough, you hit a home run with pretty much any piece of real estate around here. The cons are that it is red tape. I mean, these are a more complex way to finance a home than obviously paying cash for it or any traditional financing. You don't know what you don't know. You can't just get things like, hey, I want the money right now. Like, the HUD consultant has to come out. That will take a couple days. They need to get their pictures and things like that to the lender. The lender approves it before they send you out any payment. If you do any change orders, then obviously that's all going to have to be approved again. Okay. So if you are in the property when the rehab's being done, for me, like, I like that. I don't want to leave the property myself. I don't want to leave my house, even though I'm living in dust. I don't want to do that. So to me, that's not a con, but obviously to some people, they can't stand that. How do you qualify? We can get you or your buyers or people that you're working with. We can set up a strategy call. We'll get an application. We'll get you pre-approved for that. We'd really like to do a team call with your agent if they're not on this webinar today, just to explain the process. Chris, is there anything that I missed?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well.
Okay, good, everybody. And just so you guys know, there are, for first-time buyers, a lot of down payment assistance programs out there. In fact, in about a week, we're going to be rolling out a program called Go Prime Rewards, where as you actively participate in getting ready to buy a home, we will give you credit for paying your rent on time. If you are a first-time buyer, for fixing your credit, for opening up a savings account, and we will actually help you save money towards your closing costs. So we'll be laying out that program to you in the future. But we love to have you ask us questions, and please feel free to reach out to us. And if you're interested in real estate investing, we are teaching a 3-week class that begins in March at Wake Tech, which we're going to have some guest speakers come in. In fact, we're having a general contractor come in and talk about these types of projects, and also speak to property management and buying properties that are in college towns. So this is going to be held at Wake Tech in North Raleigh area. And we want to thank you guys so much for being in on the call today. Chris, any final questions?
No final questions that haven't been answered. We did have 2 questions along the same lines. Can the home loan be put into an IRA's name or an LLC? And I answered, it has to be in a personal name. Although if you do own the LLC 100%, you can have it transferred into your name and then pull the trigger on a rehab loan.
Right. These rehab loans are not for businesses. You're right. Yeah,
That's it.
That's it. Okay, great. Everybody, thank you for being on the call. Chris, thanks for fielding everything. And I look forward to talking with you guys soon. If you need anything, you can reach us at 919-414-4430. And I hope we all have a great year together. Thanks, everybody.